not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name is Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. So happy you decided to join me today. We're going to be talking about the state of California and gas lines. Two things you wouldn't think you'd make a big deal about something like this. But sure enough, California, in all of its wisdom, is once again beating on the door of stupidity, demanding that it be let in. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. And what effect does it have on you? Maybe none. Maybe lots. It's going to kind of depend on where you live in California. And the thing is, stupid spreads in California. So as soon as you start seeing it happening in one place, oftentimes you'll see it spreading to other places. I want to lead off today's show with a thank you to those of you who reached out with me since the last show. What's interesting is now for those of you who aren't aware, I've been doing this show since 2007, since January. I don't remember when the very first show was, maybe January 6th of 2007. I feel like it was the first week. And in all of that time, I have never, ever had anyone contact me with the kind of criticism, I guess you could call it, that I got since the last show. People will often reach out and go, hey, I don't really agree with what you think's happening with this, or, here's a community you just talked about and I feel like there's a different perspective. Those are all great conversations. I love those conversations. This one was weird for two reasons. One, the feedback itself felt a little weird. And second, I then went and looked into it. So the criticism, and I'm not even sure this is criticism. It was phrased as criticism, but you guys tell me if you agree. Someone complained that my voice was too buttery in recent shows. So the first amazing thing is someone wanted to have a conversation with me about how my voice sounded like butter, which is awesome. And something I've never heard before. And the other thing is, once I heard this criticism, I went to go figure out if it was true. So in the interest of the listener who is concerned about the butteriness of my voice, I am using a different, not compressor, I'm using a different thing. I'm using a different EQ right now, just for you. It should make my voice a little brighter, a little crisper. So maybe less butter. Although, the saying goes, butter makes everything better. So there's also that. Okay. So we've got our topic today, which is California cities banning natural gas in new homes. I'm sure most of you can jump to the bullet point as to why, and it relates to opinions relating to how to combat climate change. That's an entirely different conversation on whether or not it's hard to argue that climate change isn't happening. Climate's always changed. The geologic record shows that even before there were men and women running around, climate changes, right? That's how we get ice ages and then not ice ages, right? So climate changes. It's a thing. The question is really how much of a part does human interaction play with it? And I understand all those arguments, and that's all fine. But it's also then the degree to which these things affect climate change. Again, a topic for another time. However, there are realities on the ground that make some decisions dumber than others, right? For instance, if I am going to demand that something be done that is in direct contradiction of something terrible that is happening right now, I'm going to want to have an alternative in place, right? I want to have a solution in place so that we don't throw ourselves into a bad thing. So let's start discussing this. Now, this has already happened in Berkeley. I am quoting an article from realtybiznews.com. The claim is that big environmental benefits are to be had from eliminating natural gas lines to homes and relying solely on electricity. Now remember, we're talking about the state of California, right? Efforts to ditch the gas stove are mostly concentrated in California. It started in Berkeley, which banned the installation of gas lines in new buildings in July of last year. Since then, more than 20 other cities in the state have followed suit, and many others are said to be considering similar measures. In addition, some local governments are also considering legislation to cut building emissions as well. It follows an international trend to ban domestic natural gas that's mostly centered on Europe. Amsterdam in the Netherlands, for example, is planning to completely eliminate natural gas by 2050. So let's just sort of talk about this first by understanding the reality on the ground. Now, for those of you who don't live in California, you may have missed this. But California is not real good at providing for its electrical needs. We are already in deep trouble. Now, a lot of you are aware that we already have problems with water, but electricity is also something that is a problem. We have not invested in any infrastructure to build more power plants. I can't remember when the last one was. I want to say that the last time a power plant got built in California was right around 1999. Maybe, and I'm not even sure that was a new build. If you look at the stuff that's happened most recently, like within the last 10 years, it's typically been not new plants, but like reopened plants or the conversion of plants. And what are they converting to? Natural gas. So while the state and cities want houses to not have natural gas, the state is approving and allowing to be built natural gas turbines to power the grid. I think we closed our last nuclear power plant. That kind of is amazing. I understand that there's some sort of a knee-jerk reaction about nuclear power, but if you look back on the history of nuclear power, it's actually a super safe source of power, particularly given the latest technologies. Countries like France run predominantly on nuclear power. And it's always funny because no one ever counts the trickle of folks who die because of other ways to generate power. It's always, you got to try to focus on the dramatic stuff. But even when you do that, the numbers are ridiculously low. So I don't want to get into an argument about nuclear power, but the point is, at a time when the state is embracing more and more natural gas to run its power plants, communities across the state are not allowing anyone to build gas lines in new construction. We have power outages. We have grayouts. We have rolling power outages. This is not a state, and they're doing all of this stuff even before the state plans to try to meet their shortfall. Now, there is a article I was looking at that was talking about a 4 gigawatt shortage that isn't even going to be close to addressed until 2023. So what are these cities expecting to do between now and 2023 when these things change? Now, granted, a lot of this doesn't have to do with real estate, right? It has to do with real estate in that your options in terms of what you're going to own. If you want to buy new construction in some cities, you're not going to have an option to have natural gas. If you want to heat your water, it's going to have to be with electricity. So aside from the argument of how readily available and reliable power is in California, then there's the cost. Electricity in California is ridiculously expensive. But let's quantify that. In 2018, U.S. average electricity retail prices, California was 16.7 cents per kilowatt, which put it in the most expensive range. I'll link to an article from Cal Chamber Alert, but California electricity prices were number 7 in the United States as of, in 2018. California is dubiously grouped with Alaska, Hawaii, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Vermont in terms of them all being states where the price per kilowatt is $15.01 or higher, with California being right up there. Other states, Nevada, directly next door to us, 7 to 9 cents per kilowatt hour. Oregon, 9 to 10 cents per kilowatt hour. It's ridiculous, and this is one of those things where the folks who have screwed things up are now the ones suggesting that we all need to go with natural gas. So we've talked about supply and demand before, right? The supply and demand plays a part everywhere, right? Real estate and everything. By getting rid of natural gas, you increase the demand for electricity that's itself being generated by natural gas firing power plants. I'm not sure where the win is here. You simply then need to build more and more of these power plants in order to satisfy the need. Now, another reason why this annoys me is because it eliminates one of the excellent avenues for really forward-thinking home utilities. We talked about this a few years ago. There was a company, I'm not sure what their status is now, but they were making a device that was actually pretty darn innovative. You hooked it up to your natural gas. It only needed natural gas and water, and it would generate electricity, purified water, heat. I mean, and basically you could be off the grid with this thing with the exception of water and gas. You wouldn't have to have electricity to your house. If you lived in a state that lets you do it, you could sell your electricity back, right? So it would be like a decentralized grid. Everybody'd be generating their own power. And that's a great idea. I think that's fantastic. But of course, no one thinks that way. And by doing this, the door gets closed on that kind of technology moving forward. So not only are we making a dubious choice, at least the cities are making a dubious choice relating to real estate and natural gas, they are closing the door on a path of innovation that could actually spell better things, right? Because really, it just depends on how clean these things burn, right? Natural gas isn't evil. It just depends on how you burn it. And there's an awful lot of clean burning natural gas options. Now, granted, you're probably the least clean way for you to burn natural gas is an open flame in your water heater, but those are getting more and more efficient all the time. So I don't know. This seems like a bad decision. And here's the other thing. It absolutely affects real estate because they're not going to suddenly disconnect gas to existing homes. You can't, through your legislation, mandate, well, I guess you could. I mean, this is California. There seems to be no limit. But you can't simply mandate that, well, we're going to turn off the natural gas to all your houses, so now you have to go buy an electric oven, you have to buy an electric cooktop, you have to go buy an electric water heater. I mean, these are things that you can't just say, go out and spend $4,000 or $5,000 to, assuming you're going relatively inexpensive, to get all these things replaced, right? To replace everything in your home. And paying someone to do it, assuming you can't do it yourself. So I'm not sure this makes a whole heck of a lot of sense. It's yet another thing that happens in California that makes me scratch my head a little bit. It's sort of an immediate feel-good thing, I guess. I guess it's the whole, well, we did something mentality. But frankly, I'm not sure where the win is for anybody. And I mean anybody. The only people who would win in this would be Pacific Gas and Electric, right? Because since there'd be an increase in demand and there's no real near end in sight in terms of having low supply, they simply charge more and more, right? So that goes from being, what did I say it was, 16.7 cents per kilowatt hour. You know, that jumps up to 20 cents per kilowatt hour. So the folks who end up bearing the brunt of the cost are the folks who now have to consume more electricity to do things that they used to be able to do more cheaply through natural gas. And also, what's funny is the line we've heard all along is that migrating energy production to natural gas was the great thing to do for the environment. So, you know, I don't know why we don't solve a problem before we make it worse. Let's solve the electricity problem in California. Then we can make people more reliant on electricity, right? Doesn't that seem like the order to do it in? You don't step off the pier before the boat is there, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So it's happened in Berkeley. It's happened in 20 other cities across California, and now next on the list is well, wow. So San Jose is moving to ban natural gas in new residential buildings. This was announced in September of last year, and this is the 10th most populous U.S. city, and it's the center of Silicon Valley. And kind of amazing that a city that populous and a city that has so many homes that already run on natural gas would outlaw including natural gas. It's a shocker. So in any event, it's funny. One consistent thing that we seem to talk about on this show are all the different ways that California seems to be really wanting to just make it easy for folks to decide to leave. Now, is this a huge deal by itself? Maybe not. I mean, I think it will be once people start getting that electric bill. I have gas in my home. I cook on gas. I heat my water with gas. If I didn't do that, my electric bill would be substantially higher. And I'm thinking, what would I do? What would be the thought process of somebody who is suddenly faced with not having gas and hating to cook with an electric cooktop? And I've thought back, well, what did I do in the past in homes that I didn't have a gas cooktop? Whether it was a rental or I just didn't have it, I bought it and I didn't have it. Now, the home I lived in prior to the one I'm in now, it did not have gas for a cooktop when I bought it. Within about a year, it did. About a year and a half after I bought the place, I converted the cooktop over to gas. I prefer to cook with gas. But what did I do in those times when I didn't have gas? I had a very well-used barbecue. Now, am I typical? Would most people make that call? I don't know. But it's true, in my case, that I probably cooked 3 or 4 meals out of 7 a week, or 7 days a week. 3 days a week, 4 days a week, I barbecued. So how does that feed the climate change beast? Gotta think that the percent of folks who will cook that way will go up. In my case, in one instance, when I lived in an apartment, it was all charcoal. So it was coal, basically. I was burning coal out there in a big metal tub to cook food. And later, in the house that I later converted to gas, it was propane, because I had a propane tank attached to my barbecue. So I'm not thinking there's a huge win there. Of course, maybe there is some kind of win because other people will just go ahead and cook with an electric cooktop. I did cook with the electric cooktop, but once I had a gas cooktop, the barbecuing went almost completely away. So, there's that as well. Now, you as a investor, I would love to see what the long-term plan for this is. Some of these articles are phrased like they would force people to upgrade their appliances to being electrical. Like at some point there would be a drop-dead date where you'd be expected to replace your appliances. Now, if you're someone who and you know what? Here's the thing. If you are someone who owns an investment property in California, the very first thing I would be worried about would be anybody out there who owns rental properties with more than 4 units. Because those will be the very first ones they'll hit. Or maybe they won't. Maybe the lobby is strong enough. But it seems like they'd go for the folks they could most easily point at as evil, big real estate people. So it seems to me that would be where they'd start, right? If they are going to do that, they would mandate that if you have a rental property with more than 4 units, by such and such a date, everything has to be converted over to electrical, no gas. Now, that's not huge, right? Because most apartment complexes, newer ones anyway, don't have natural gas, right? So it wouldn't get the absolute biggest players. I can't remember the last time I saw a gas cooktop in an apartment. But if you are one of those 5 to 8 unit folks, I have lived in units that have gas in those. In fact, started as electric, but investors installed gas to attract renters. So that might be a thing. That's something that you as a potential investor, if you're looking to shop now or if you already own, be aware of that part of the equation. There may come a date where you're expected to replace all the appliances with electric appliances if they aren't already electric. if you're looking to purchase now, be ready for that day when they go, okay, now everybody under 5 units is now expected, with it's a rental, is expected to update. Be ready for that as well. So as an investor in California, or even maybe as a single family residential buyer, maybe the move is, assuming they're going to eventually push this down everyone's throat, is to start considering electric preferred, unless you want to just ride the wave and hope they're not going to make it go all the way down to single family residential. My guess is that probably wouldn't happen. My guess is if you bought a single family residential home that had gas appliances, that you'd be okay. Maybe not okay if you rent them, right? It's very interesting, the segmented groups that California will often burden with these kind of things. But just something to be aware of. It's amazing to me that this kind of stuff goes on, that these seem like good ideas. They seem to happen in an absence of a lot of really good information. But hey, maybe you're right on board. Maybe you think this is fantastic, and this is a great way for California to move forward with agendas that it thinks are important. I know from the folks I talk to, this will probably just end up being one more reason why folks want to move to Idaho and Nevada and Arizona and Texas and Oregon, which is already slowly slouching in the same direction. But in any event, it's just another way that folks who seem to think they know better are telling you how you should be building your houses. So, all right. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I'm in general, I'm not a real pro interference guy. I prefer the markets to decide what should happen to these things. I don't see an overabundance of indisputable benefit here. I think the effect it could potentially have on individuals is negative in general. Financially and getting the enjoyment out of your property, I think, are two things that would be negatively affected. But I hope that's some useful info for you. More of just sort of a weird law update for those of us subjected to the weirdnesses of California. With any luck, you're not in a place where you're constantly getting poked in the head with new regulations that kind of force you into consuming a thing that is more expensive than it is anywhere else in the country, like electricity. But anyway, so I'd love to see the solution come to the electricity problem come before we force everyone to go over to electricity. All right, everyone, thanks again for listening. I truly appreciate you spending your valuable time with me. Hopefully you've gotten some at least interesting topics to bounce around in your head till the next time we talk. Thanks again for listening. I'll talk to you all next time.